I never thought I'd see such naked greed in my own daughter's eyes. When my medical bills piled up and I asked for help, Vanessa called me a financial burden before walking out of my hospital room. 3 months later, on what she thought was just another dreary Monday, I invited her to my attorney's office for what she assumed would be a pathetic attempt to secure a nursing home loan. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed because tomorrow, I've saved something extra special for you. The look on her face when the vault doors opened to reveal my silent empire of $70 million. That moment alone was worth every cent I'd kept hidden for decades. The rain pelted against the window of room 307 at Westlake Memorial Hospital, the drumming sound almost drowning out the steady beep of my heart monitor. I'd been here for 11 days, ever since my heart decided to remind me that at 68, I wasn't as invincible as I sometimes felt. The doctors called it a moderate cardiac event, a gentler way of saying I'd had a heart attack while tending to my garden on a perfectly ordinary Tuesday afternoon. Mrs. Sullivan, your daughter is here. The young nurse, Kira, according to her name badge, smiled as she held the door open. I straightened up against the pillows, wincing slightly at the pull of the IV in my arm, and tried to look less frail than I felt. Appearances mattered today. This conversation had been a long time coming. Vanessa strode in wearing her signature charcoal pantsuit and blood-red heels that announced her arrival with sharp clicks against the linoleum floor. At 42, my daughter had cultivated a carefully crafted image of success. The polished corporate attorney who never had a hair out of place, never showed weakness. She'd pulled her sleek, dark hair into a tight bun that accentuated her sharp cheekbones, creating an impression of severity that hadn't always been there. Mother. She leaned down to brush her lips against my cheek, the scent of her expensive perfume momentarily overwhelming the antiseptic hospital smell. You're looking better. Any word on when they're discharging you? No. How are you feeling? No genuine concern. Just straight to logistics. Hello to you too, Vanessa, I said, keeping my voice light. The doctors want to run another round of tests tomorrow. Maybe the day after if all goes well. She nodded, pulling out her phone to make a note. I'll have my assistant adjust my schedule for Thursday then. I can swing by around 3 to take you home. Actually, I said carefully, that's part of what I wanted to discuss with you. I gestured to the plastic chair beside my bed. Would you mind sitting for a moment? Something in my tone must have alerted her. A slight frown creased her forehead as she lowered herself into the chair, crossing her legs at the ankle. Is something wrong? Did they find something else? I shook my head. No, nothing like that. But I've been talking with Dr. Mehta about my recovery and I paused, gathering my courage. I'm going to need some help, Vanessa, both physically and financially. Her posture stiffened immediately. What kind of help? I reached for the folder on my bedside table, wincing again as the movement pulled at my IV. The insurance only covers part of this hospitalization. There's a substantial remaining balance, plus I'll need at-home care for at least a few weeks, some specialized equipment, and quite a few new medications. I handed her the folder. It's all outlined in there. Vanessa opened the folder with hesitant fingers, as if it might contain something contagious. Her eyes widened as she scanned the first page. $34,000? That can't be right. I'm afraid it is. That's after insurance. But what about your savings? Your pension? I sighed, looking out at the rain-streaked window. You know I had to use most of my savings when the basement flooded last year. The pension covers my monthly expenses, but not something like this. What? About the house? Can't you take out a second mortgage? Already did that for the new roof 3 years ago. I turned back to face her. Vanessa, I wouldn't ask if I had any other option. I was hoping you might be able to help with at least part of the hospital bill. I can try to work out a payment. Plan for the rest. For a moment, she just stared at me, her expression unreadable. Then she closed the folder with a decisive snap. Let me get this straight. You're asking me to just hand over tens of thousands of dollars? Just like that? Not all at once, I said quickly. I know that's a lot of money. Maybe we could work out an arrangement. An arrangement? She let out a harsh laugh. Mother, do you have any idea what my life costs? The mortgage on my condo, private school for Emma, the alimony I still have to pay Paul even though he's perfectly capable of working. I don't have spare cash just sitting around. I watched her face carefully, noting the flush of anger rising on her cheeks. You mentioned last Christmas that your firm made you partner. I thought perhaps, yes, I'm partner now, which means even more expenses. The right clothes, the right car, the right address. It all matters in my world. She stood up abruptly, pacing to the window. God, this is so typical. You've never understood what it takes to succeed. I felt a familiar heaviness settle in my chest that had nothing to do with my heart condition. This reaction wasn't unexpected, but experiencing it still hurt. Vanessa, I'm not asking you to bankrupt yourself, just to help your mother through a difficult time. She turned back to me, her expression hardening into something I barely recognized. And what about all the times I needed help? When I was drowning in student loans? When Paul walked out and left me with a 3-year-old and a mortgage? Where was your financial assistance then? I gave what I could, I said quietly. I watched Emma every weekend so you could work. I helped with her school supplies, her clothes. Babysitting and buying some notebooks isn't the same as $34,000. She was almost shouting now. Please lower your voice, I said, glancing toward the door. This isn't the place for... No, Mother, you need to hear this. She stepped closer to the bed, her voice dropping to a bitter hiss. I have worked for everything I have. Every single thing. I clawed my way out of the middle-class mediocrity you and Dad were so comfortable with. I made something of myself despite having parents who never understood ambition. Each word landed like a physical blow. I kept my expression neutral with effort, years of practice helping me maintain composure. Is that really how you see your upbringing? As mediocre? What else would you call it? Dad worked at the same company for 40 years without ever moving up. You taught elementary school and did little craft projects on the side. You never pushed for more. Never took risks. We took plenty of risks, I countered. Memories of late-night conversations with my late husband Robert flooding back. The careful calculations, the quiet investments, the plans we'd made. Just not the kind you would recognize, Vanessa scoffed. Whatever helps you sleep at night. The point is, I can't bail you out of this. It's not my responsibility. I looked at her, really looked at her, and saw not just the successful attorney, but the little girl who used to bring me dandelion bouquets, the teenager who cried when she didn't make law review, the young mother who rocked her colicky daughter through endless nights. Somewhere along the way, she had become someone else entirely. I'm not asking you to bail me out, I said, keeping my voice steady. I'm asking my daughter to help me in a time of need. That's what family does. Family? She laughed, but the sound held no warmth. Is that what we are? Because it feels like I'm just your retirement plan. She picked up her designer handbag from the floor. I have a meeting in 30 minutes. I need to go. Vanessa, please. We can figure this out together. She paused at the door, her back to me. I'll see if I can move some things around to pick you up on Thursday, but I can't help with the bills. You're going to have to figure that out yourself. She glanced back, her eyes sweeping over my hospital. Gown, the IV stand, the plain room with its single wilting plant. Maybe it's time to consider selling the house, downsizing to something more appropriate for your situation. With that, she was gone. The click of her heels fading down the hallway, leaving behind only the scent of her perfume and the weight of her rejection. I closed my eyes, allowing a single tear to escape before wiping it away. Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story. Then I reached for my ancient flip phone, the one Vanessa always mocked, and dialed a number I knew by heart. Martin? It's Evelyn Sullivan. I think it's time. I paused, listening to his response. Yes, I'm certain. She's made her position quite clear. Another pause. Thursday morning would be perfect. Make sure everything is in place. I smiled slightly at his question. No, I don't think she has any idea at all. I hung up and leaned back against the pillows, staring at the rain outside. Robert and I had anticipated this day might come. We'd spent decades preparing for it, building something in the shadows while living modestly in the light. Our little test had confirmed what I'd feared. Vanessa had become exactly the kind of person we'd tried not to raise, someone who measured human worth by financial value. Well, she was about to learn a very expensive lesson. The next 2 days passed slowly. Dr. Mehta confirmed I was stable enough to go home, though he emphasized the need for follow-up care. The hospital financial services representative came by with payment plan options, her expression sympathetic as she explained. The terms. I signed where indicated, knowing the papers would be irrelevant soon enough. Thursday morning dawned clear and bright, the spring sunshine a welcome change after days of rain. I was dressed and waiting when Kira came to help with the discharge process. Your daughter called, she said, checking my vitals one final time. She's stuck in traffic, but should be here within the hour. Actually, I said, there's been a change of plans. My attorney is coming to get me instead. Kira looked surprised. Oh, would you like me to call your daughter and let her know? No need, I replied, smiling serenely. She'll find out soon enough. At precisely 10:30, Martin Edwards walked into my hospital room. At 73, he still carried himself with the dignified bearing of the naval officer he'd once been, his silver hair neatly trimmed, his navy suit immaculate. He'd been Robert's closest friend since college and our family attorney for over 40 years. Evelyn, he said warmly, taking my hand in both of his. You gave us quite a scare. Nothing. Keeps me down for long, Martin, you know that. He chuckled, helping me into the wheelchair that hospital policy required for discharge. Indeed I do. Everything is arranged as you requested. Thomas is waiting with the car. As Martin wheeled me through the hospital corridors toward the exit, my phone buzzed with an incoming text. Vanessa, stuck in deposition. Can't make it until 5. Can you get a taxi home? I didn't bother responding. Outside, instead of the practical Toyota I'd driven for the past decade, a sleek black Lincoln Continental awaited us, with Thomas, Martin's assistant, holding the rear door open. A few of the hospital staff did double takes, as Martin helped me from the wheelchair into the luxury vehicle. Not exactly keeping a low profile, are we? I commented as I settled into the buttery leather seat. Martin's eyes twinkled as he sat beside me. After 68 years of modesty, I think you're entitled to a little flash, Evelyn. As Thomas pulled away from the curb, I gazed back at Westlake Memorial Hospital, the place where my carefully constructed facade had finally served its purpose. Phase 1 of our plan was complete. Vanessa had shown her true colors, just as I'd feared she might. Did you call Vanessa's office as I asked? I inquired once we were on the highway. Martin nodded. Her assistant confirmed she's free at 2 o'clock. The message was delivered that her presence is required at my office regarding an urgent matter concerning your medical care and financial situation. And she agreed to come? With some reluctance, according to the assistant. But yes, she'll be there. I smiled, watching the familiar streets of Burlington give way to the more affluent neighborhoods of Oak Ridge, where Martin's law firm occupied the top floor of one of the city's few high-rises. She thinks she's coming to discuss nursing home, options or perhaps a reverse mortgage on the house. She's in for quite a surprise, Martin remarked dryly. She certainly is. I gazed out at the passing scenery, at the upscale shops and restaurants Vanessa frequented, but I had always avoided. You know, Martin, Robert and I never wanted to raise a child who valued money above all else. We worked so hard to teach her that character matters more than possessions. You can't blame yourself, Evelyn. You and Robert were exemplary parents. Were we? I sighed. Sometimes I wonder if our plan was misguided from the start. If we'd been more transparent, then she never would have shown her true colors. Martin finished for me. Remember what Robert always said? Money doesn't change people. It reveals them. I nodded, my throat tight with emotion. My beloved Robert, gone 5 years now. How I wished he could be here for this moment we'd planned together for so long. I just hope it's not too late, I murmured. Not just for Vanessa, but for Emma too. We arrived at the Oak Ridge Financial Center at 1:30, giving me time to freshen up in Martin's private office bathroom. I changed from my casual going-home clothes into the outfit Martin's wife Clara had brought earlier at my request. A simple but elegant navy dress with a strand of pearls Robert had given me on our 30th anniversary. As I emerged, Martin looked up from his desk and smiled. "You look formidable, Evelyn." "Good," I replied, settling into one of the comfortable client chairs. That's precisely the impression I want to make. At precisely 2:05 p.m., Martin's intercom buzzed. "Ms. Sullivan has arrived," his receptionist announced. "Show her in, please," Martin responded, standing to greet our visitor. The door opened and Vanessa strode in, irritation evident in every line of her body. "Mother?" She stopped short, clearly surprised to see me sitting calmly in Martin's office rather than recovering at home. "What is this about?" "I got some cryptic message about an urgent financial matter." "Hello, Vanessa," I said evenly. "Please, have a seat. We have a great deal to discuss." She remained standing, glancing suspiciously between me and Martin. "Who is this? And why are you even out of the hospital? I was supposed to pick you up." "Later." "Yes, about that," I replied. "I made other arrangements when it became clear your schedule took priority over your mother's health." A flash of guilt crossed her face, quickly replaced by defensiveness. "I told you I was in a deposition. Some of us have professional obligations." "Indeed." I gestured again to the empty chair. "This is Martin Edwards, our family attorney. And yes, this meeting is about financial matters, specifically about inheritance." That got her attention. She sat down slowly, setting her leather portfolio on her lap like a shield. "Inheritance? Mother, is there something you're not telling me about your condition?" "My heart is fine," I assured her. "But recent events have prompted me to make some decisions about my estate." I looked to Martin and nodded slightly. "Ms. Sullivan," Martin began formally, "your mother has asked me to explain certain arrangements that were put in place many years ago by her and your late father." Vanessa's posture stiffened. "What arrangements?" Martin opened a thick file on his desk. "To put it simply, the modest lifestyle your parents maintained throughout their lives was a conscious choice, not a financial necessity." Vanessa's brow furrowed. "What are you talking about?" I leaned forward slightly. "Vanessa, when you were in my hospital room, you spoke rather dismissively about the middle-class mediocrity your father and I were comfortable with. You mentioned that Dad worked at the same company for 40 years without ever moving up. So..." Her tone was defensive. "So," I continued, "what you didn't know, what almost no one knew, was that by the time your father had been at Westlake Manufacturing for 10 years, he owned 15% of the company through a series of private investments." For the first time, I saw Vanessa's composure truly slip. Her mouth opened slightly, but no words came out. Martin picked up the narrative. "Robert Sullivan maintained his position as senior engineer not because he lacked ambition. but because it gave him insider knowledge that proved invaluable for his investment decisions. Meanwhile, your mother's little craft projects, as you called them, became the seed funding for what eventually grew into Sullivan Heritage Designs. Sullivan Heritage? Vanessa repeated faintly. The home goods company? I nodded. Currently valued at approximately $28 million. I sold my controlling interest 3 years ago but maintained a significant share of stock. Vanessa's face had gone pale. But the house, your car, you've always lived so simply, I suggested. That was by design, Vanessa. Your father, and I believed that wealth should be a private matter, that it should be earned, stewarded responsibly, and eventually passed on with purpose. I paused, letting the words sink in. We also believed that character is revealed in how people treat those they believe can offer them nothing in return. The implications of this statement hung in the air between us. Vanessa's eyes widened as understanding dawned. The hospital, she whispered. The medical bills. That was a test. Yes, I acknowledged quietly. And I'm sorry to say, my dear, that you failed it quite spectacularly. Vanessa's perfectly manicured nails dug into the leather portfolio on her lap, her knuckles whitening. A test? Her voice trembled slightly. You put me through that, made me believe you were desperate, just to see what I would do? Yes. I saw no reason to soften the truth now. Your father and I began planning this decades ago, when we noticed certain concerning tendencies in you. Martin discreetly stood. I'll give you both some privacy. Evelyn, shall I have Clara bring in some tea? I nodded gratefully. That would be lovely. Once the door closed behind him, Vanessa leaned forward, her voice, a harsh whisper. Concerning tendencies? What is that supposed to mean? I met her gaze steadily. Do you remember your 16th birthday? She blinked, clearly thrown by the apparent change of subject. What does that have to do with anything? Humor me. She sighed, impatience edging her voice. Fine. Dad bought me that used Honda Civic. I was devastated. All my friends got new cars. And what did you do? A flush crept up her neck. I may have overreacted. You slammed the door to your room so hard it cracked the frame, then refused to speak to us for 3 days, I corrected quietly. You called your father a cheap failure within his hearing. I was 16, she protested. Teenagers say stupid things? Yes, they do. But that wasn't an isolated incident, was it? I settled back in my chair. When you graduated law school, we gave you a check for $5,000. You seemed almost offended. Because my classmates' parents were buying them condos and new cars, she countered. I had student loans to pay off, which we had offered to cover completely when you started school, I reminded her. You insisted on taking them out yourself. Because, and I quote, I don't need your charity. I wanted independence. Did you? Or did you assume we didn't have more to give? I studied her face, searching for some glimmer of self-awareness. Vanessa, from the time you were very young, you seemed to resent what you perceived as our financial limitations. You were embarrassed by our modest home, our practical cars, my career as a teacher. That's not... Let me finish, please. I held up a hand. At first, we thought maybe you were just materialistic, which would have been disappointing but not unusual for a child growing up in a consumer culture. But as you grew older, we noticed something more troubling. You didn't just want things. You seemed to measure human worth by financial status. A soft knock at the door interrupted us. Clara Edwards entered with a tea tray, her kind face brightening, when she saw me. Evelyn. So wonderful to see you up and about. She set the tray on the side table and gave me a gentle hug before turning to Vanessa with a polite smile. You must be Vanessa. Martin has told me so much about you. Has he? Vanessa's tone was flat, her social mask firmly back in place. Clara seemed unfazed by the chilly reception. "I'll leave you to your conversation. Evelyn, chamomile with honey, just as you like it." "Thank you, Clara. You're a treasure." After she left, I poured tea for both of us, though Vanessa made no move to take her cup. "As I was saying," I continued, "your father and I became concerned about the values you were developing. When you married Paul, you seemed more interested in his family's country club membership than his character." "That's unfair," Vanessa protested. "I loved Paul." "Perhaps you did in your way, but when his family's business collapsed and their fortune evaporated, your marriage didn't survive the sudden shift in status." Her eyes flashed with anger. "He changed after that. Became depressed, unmotivated. That's why we divorced." "Is that what you tell yourself?" I sipped my tea calmly. "Your father and I saw how you treated Paul once he could no longer provide the lifestyle you wanted. It broke our hearts." "So what?" she snapped, composure cracking. "You've been secretly judging me my entire life, hoarding your millions while watching me struggle with bills and childcare and career pressure. What kind of sick game is that?" "Not a game," I said firmly. "A principle. Robert and I believed that wealth without character corrupts. We wanted to ensure that whoever inherited our fortune would use it with integrity and compassion." "So you lied to me." Her voice was cold. "For my entire life." "We didn't lie. We simply didn't volunteer information about our financial situation. We lived according to our values, modestly, responsibly, generously with causes we believed in. While I was killing myself working 80-hour weeks to afford private school for Emma." Her control finally shattered. "Do you have any idea what I've sacrificed? The stress I've been under? All while you were sitting on a fortune that could have made our lives so much easier?" I set down my teacup with a soft clink. "And there it is. You believe you were entitled to our money simply because it existed. I'm your daughter," she nearly shouted. "Yes, my daughter who, when believing I had nothing to offer her, decided I wasn't worth helping at my most vulnerable moment." The words landed like a physical blow. Vanessa fell silent, her breath coming in short, sharp bursts. "Perhaps," I continued more gently, "if you had shown even a hint of compassion, if you had offered to help in any way you could, even if it wasn't the full amount, things might be different now." She swallowed hard. "So that's it? I failed? Your little test, so I get nothing?" I didn't say that. I rose carefully from my chair and walked to the window overlooking the city. "Martin will explain the details, but the short version is this. Your father and I established a trust. You are still the primary beneficiary, but under certain conditions." "What conditions?" Her voice was wary. I turned back to face her. "First, I think you should understand the full scope of what we're discussing." I pressed the intercom button on Martin's desk. "We're ready now." A moment later, Martin returned with a thick binder and a security officer from the building. "Ms. Sullivan, if you would follow us, please." Vanessa looked bewildered but stood, following us out of the office and down a private elevator to the basement level. The security officer used a key card to access a restricted area, leading us to a set of heavy doors marked Private Vault Services. "What is this place?" Vanessa asked, looking around at the marble floors and subdued lighting. "Oak Ridge Financial houses a private secure facility for certain high-value clients," Martin explained, as the guard unlocked the double doors. Inside was a reception area staffed by a single attendant who nodded in recognition when we entered. "Mr. Edwards, Mrs. Sullivan, the conference room is ready for you." We were led to a windowless room with a large table. On it lay several document boxes, along with folders neatly labeled with various company names. Martin gestured for us to sit. "Evelyn, with your permission?" At my nod, he opened the first box and began laying out documents. The Sullivan Family Trust was established 27 years ago, initially funded with profits from Robert's early investments and Evelyn's growing design business. As of last quarter's valuation, the trust holds assets worth approximately $73 million. Vanessa made a small choking sound. These assets include, Martin continued, a 30% stake in Sullivan Heritage Designs, minority positions in 12 other companies, a commercial real estate portfolio spanning 3 states, an art collection currently on long-term loan to 3 museums, and various other investments. He opened a folder containing photographs. There's also the property portfolio, the villa in Tuscany, the apartment in Manhattan, the mountain cabin in Colorado, and the beach house in Sanibel Island. Vanessa stared at the photographs, her expression stunned. I don't understand. We never went to any of these places. We always vacationed at that same lakeside cabin in Michigan. By choice, I said quietly. Those properties were investments, not for our personal use. We preferred the simplicity of the lake cabin. Martin continued methodically through the assets, laying out the empire Robert and I had built so carefully over decades. With each revelation, I watched Vanessa's face cycle through shock, disbelief, and finally, a dawning anger. All this time, she said when Martin finally finished. All these years of struggling, of feeling like I had to claw my way up from nothing, and you were secretly rich as Midas. She laughed bitterly. Was anything about my childhood real? Or was it all some elaborate character test? Your childhood was very real, I assured her. We loved you deeply, wanted the best for you. We simply believed the best didn't mean the most expensive. So what happens now? She demanded. You dangle this fortune in front of me, then snatch it away because I didn't pass your righteousness exam? Martin cleared his throat. Perhaps I should explain the terms of the trust. He opened yet another folder. Upon Evelyn's passing, which we all hope is many years from now, the trust will be distributed according to specific guidelines. The primary condition is this: no beneficiary may receive their full inheritance until they have demonstrated, over a period of at least 1 year, a consistent commitment to charitable work and financial responsibility. Defined how? Vanessa asked sharply. Regular volunteer hours with an approved organization, documented financial contributions proportional to income, participation in the trust's grant-making decisions, and completion of a financial stewardship course, Martin read. Additionally, any beneficiary with children must establish an education trust for those children before accessing their own funds. Vanessa turned to me, her expression incredulous. You're blackmailing me into becoming a charity case. Not at all, I replied calmly. I'm offering you an opportunity to develop the character that wealth requires. You can, of course, decline. And get nothing. Not nothing. You would still receive a modest stipend. But the bulk of the inheritance would go to Emma directly when she turns 25, after she completes the same requirements. The color drained from Vanessa's face. You'd cut me out in favor of my 12-year-old daughter? I would ensure that Emma has the guidance and structure to handle wealth responsibly, I corrected. Something I'm no longer confident you can provide. Vanessa stood abruptly, pacing the small room. This is insane. You can't just... I could contest this. Take it to court. Martin shook his head. The trust documentation is quite sound, Ms. Sullivan. Your parents consulted with several top estate attorneys in creating it. Any court challenge would be both expensive and unlikely to succeed. She stopped pacing and braced her hands on the table, leaning toward me. Why now? If you've been planning this for decades, why reveal it today? I met her gaze steadily. Because my heart attack made me realize time is precious, Vanessa. I had hoped to never need this test. Hoped that you would have grown into the kind of person who would help her mother without expectation of reward. When that proved not to be the case, I decided there was no reason to continue the charade. The charade, she repeated hollowly. My entire understanding of my family has been a charade. No, I said firmly. Your understanding of what matters has been distorted. I gestured to the wealth laid out before us. None of this is what gave your father and me a good life. It was love, purpose, integrity, values we tried to instill in you, apparently without success. Vanessa sank back into her chair, her anger seemingly giving way to exhaustion. So that's it? I'm just supposed to accept your judgment and jump through whatever hoops you've set up if I want my birthright? It was never your birthright, I said gently. It was always a responsibility we weren't sure you were ready for. She looked away, blinking rapidly. For a moment, I thought I glimpsed something beneath her hardened exterior, perhaps hurt, perhaps genuine regret. Then her professional mask slipped back into place. I need time to think about this, she said stiffly. To consult with my own attorney. Of course, Martin agreed. Take whatever time you need. All the relevant documentation is here for your review. As she gathered her things, Vanessa paused, her hand hovering over a photograph of the Tuscany villa. Did Dad know? When he was sick at the end, did he know I would fail this test? The question caught me off guard with its vulnerability. He hoped you wouldn't, I answered honestly. He believed in you until the very end. Something flashed across her face, pain, perhaps even shame, before she squared her shoulders and headed for the door. I'll be in touch. After she left, Martin sat beside me, concern etched on his kind face. Are you all right, Evelyn? That couldn't have been easy. I sighed, suddenly feeling every one of my 68 years. No, it wasn't, but it was necessary. Do you think she'll come around? I gazed at the door through which my daughter had departed. I don't know, Martin. The woman I saw in that hospital room was a stranger to me, but somewhere inside her is still the little girl who used to bring me dandelions and tell me I was the best mommy in the world. I smiled sadly. I have to believe that girl isn't completely gone. Martin patted my hand. Robert would be proud of you, you know. Standing your ground like this. Would he? I wondered aloud. Or would he think I'd been too harsh? Robert believed in tough love when necessary. And he believed in you, completely. I nodded, gathering strength from the memory of my husband's unwavering faith. Well then, I suppose we'll see what happens next. The ball, as they say, is in Vanessa's court. What I didn't tell Martin was the heaviness in my heart, the doubt creeping in at the edges of my certainty. Had we made a mistake, Robert and I, with our grand experiment in character building? Had our well-intentioned deception caused the very qualities we'd hoped to prevent? As we left the vault, those questions followed me like shadows. But it was too late for second-guessing now. The truth was out. The challenge laid down. All I could do was wait to see what kind of woman my daughter would choose to become. 3 weeks passed without a word from Vanessa. I settled back into my modest 2-story colonial in Mapleton Heights, the same neighborhood where I'd lived for over 40 years. The house needed work. The wallpaper in the upstairs hallway was peeling at the edges, and the kitchen cabinets had last been updated when Reagan was president. But it was home. Familiar. Safe. Dr. Maida had arranged for a home health aide to visit 3 times a week. Joanna was a sturdy woman in her 50s with strong hands and a no-nonsense attitude that I found refreshing. She helped with exercises to strengthen my heart, monitored my medications, and occasionally prepared meals that adhered to my new dietary restrictions. You've got a visitor, Joanna announced one Thursday afternoon, poking her head into the sunroom where I was working on a crossword puzzle. Little girl says she's your granddaughter. My pulse quickened. Emma? Send her in, please. Emma appeared. In the doorway, her school backpack still slung over one shoulder. At 12, she was all gangly limbs and uncertain posture, caught in that awkward transition between childhood and adolescence. Her dark hair was pulled back in a messy ponytail. Her eyes, so like her mother's, darting nervously around the room. Hi, Grandma, she said, hovering near the entrance as if unsure of her welcome. "Emma, what a wonderful surprise." I set aside my puzzle and patted the wicker chair beside me. "Come sit. How did you get here?" She dropped her backpack and crossed the room, perching on the edge of the chair. "Mom's driver brought me. He's waiting outside." I raised an eyebrow. "Does your mother know you're here?" Emma shook her head, a flicker of defiance crossing her face. "She thinks I'm at debate club, but I needed to see you." "Oh?" I tried to keep my tone light, though concern stirred within me. "What's so urgent that it requires subterfuge?" "Mom's acting weird." Emma leaned forward, lowering her voice as if sharing a secret. "Like, really weird? She's been locked in her home office for days, making calls, barely sleeping. When I ask what's going on, she just says, 'adult business,' and changes the subject." I sighed inwardly. Vanessa was likely consulting with attorneys, financial advisors, perhaps even private investigators, trying to find a loophole in our carefully constructed trust. "I'm sure your mother is just busy." "With work," I offered. Emma gave me a look that was remarkably adult in its skepticism. "No, this is different. And it started right after she went to see you at the lawyer's office." She tilted her head, studying me with uncomfortably perceptive eyes. "Something happened, didn't it? Something big." I hesitated, caught between honesty and discretion. Emma was only 12, too young to be burdened with the complexities of adult finances and family tensions. Yet she was clearly intelligent enough to sense that something significant had shifted. "Your mother and I had a difficult conversation," I said carefully, "about money and family responsibilities." "You mean about your medical bills? Mom told me you asked her for help and she couldn't afford it." Emma's directness was startling. "But that doesn't make sense. Mom has tons of money. She just bought a new Audi last month." I felt a flare of anger toward Vanessa for involving Emma, however peripherally, in our conflict. "It's more complicated than that, dear." "Is it true you're secretly super rich?" Emma blurted out. I nearly dropped my glass of water. "What makes you say that?" Emma shrugged, picking at a loose thread on her uniform skirt. "I heard Mom on the phone with someone named Harrison. She said something about $70 million and ridiculous moral conditions and bypassing the primary beneficiary." She glanced up, her expression troubled. "She sounded really angry, Grandma." I set down my glass carefully, gathering my thoughts. How much should I tell her? What would Robert do in this situation? "Emma," I began slowly, "there are some family matters that your mother and I need to work through. Adult things that—" "I'm not a baby," she interrupted, a flash of her mother's stubbornness emerging. "I know when I'm being kept out of important stuff. Mom does it all the time." I studied my granddaughter's face, the determination in her eyes, the set of her jaw. In many ways, she reminded me of Vanessa at the same age, before status and ambition had hardened her. But there was something else there, too, a quality of thoughtfulness, of empathy that gave me hope. "You're right," I said finally. "You're not a baby. But this situation is very complicated, and I don't want to put you in the middle of a disagreement between your mother and me." Emma considered this, then nodded slowly. "Okay, but can you at least tell me if you're all right?" Mom made. "It sounded like you were in financial trouble because of the hospital, but now I'm confused." "I'm fine, sweetheart. My medical expenses are being taken care of." I reached out to squeeze her hand. "You don't need to worry about me." She didn't look entirely convinced, but seemed to accept that this was all the information she would get, for now. We spent the next hour in easier conversation. Her classes, her debate team victories, the book series she was currently devouring at a rate of 1 volume per week. As the afternoon light began to fade, Emma checked her phone and jumped. "Up. I have to go. Mom will be home by 6, and I need to be there before she is." I walked her to the door, moving slower than I used to, but steady enough. "Remember, Your first responsibility is to do well in school and enjoy being 12. Let the adults handle their problems. She hesitated on the porch, then turned and hugged me fiercely. I love you, Grandma. Don't let Mom push you around, okay? The simple declaration pierced straight through my careful composure. I love you too, Emma, more than you know. I watched from the window as she climbed into the black SUV parked at the curb, a vehicle worth more than most people in this neighborhood earned in a year. Such a strange life she led. Private school and luxury cars alongside a mother who measured worth in dollars and status. Yet somehow, she seemed to have developed a moral compass that pointed truer than her mother's. Perhaps there was hope yet. The confrontation, when it finally came, was nothing like I had expected. 5 days after Emma's visit, I was in the garden, carefully pruning the rose bushes Robert had planted for our 30th anniversary. The May sunshine was warm on my back, and for the first time since my heart attack, I felt almost normal again, connected to the earth, to the life Robert and I had built together, to the simple pleasures that no amount of wealth could enhance. The sound of tires on gravel alerted me to a visitor. I straightened carefully, one hand pressed against my lower back, and turned to see a familiar silver Audi pulling into my driveway. Vanessa stepped out, dressed more casually than I had seen. Her in years, jeans, a simple blouse, her hair loose around her shoulders. She stood by the car for a moment, surveying the modest house, the well-kept but certainly not luxurious garden, the aging Toyota in the garage. "Mother," she called, making her way across the lawn toward me. "Should you be out here exerting yourself? So soon after a heart attack?" I stripped off my gardening gloves. "Dr. Maida says light activity is good for recovery. The roses needed attention." She reached the garden bed, glancing at the pruned bushes with an unreadable expression. "Dad's? Mr. Lincoln's. I remember when he planted them." The fact that she remembered the variety name surprised me. "Yes, still going strong after all these years." An awkward silence fell between us. Finally, Vanessa gestured toward the porch. "Can we talk?" I nodded, leading the way to the wicker furniture set that had graced our porch for decades. As we settled, and I noticed Vanessa looking around with new eyes, not with her usual barely concealed disdain for our shabby furnishings, but with something like wonder. "All these years," she said quietly, "I thought you and Dad couldn't afford better. That you were stuck in some middle-class rut because you lacked ambition or financial acumen. We could have afforded anything we wanted," I replied simply. "We just happened to want this." She shook her head, a rueful smile tugging at her lips. "I've spent the past month talking to financial advisors, attorneys, even a therapist. Do you know what they all said, in different ways? That I've been chasing the wrong things my entire adult life." This was not the angry confrontation I had anticipated. I waited, letting her continue. "The thing is," she went on, "I truly believed I was doing the right thing. Building security, creating opportunities for Emma, establishing myself in a competitive field." She met my gaze directly. "I thought I was protecting us from ending up like Aunt Sarah." Sarah. My younger sister, who had lost everything in a bad investment and spent her final years dependent on the charity of others. The memory of Sarah's humiliation, her depression, her early death had clearly left a deeper mark on Vanessa than I had realized. "I was 15 when Aunt Sarah moved into that terrible assisted living place," Vanessa continued. "I remember visiting her there, seeing how the staff treated her because she couldn't afford the premium care package. I swore I would never end up like that, dependent, diminished, discarded." "Oh, Vanessa," I sighed. "Is that what's been driving you all these years? Fear?" She looked away, her fingers tracing the weathered arm of the wicker chair. "I thought if I accumulated enough, money, status, power, I could keep myself and Emma safe from that kind of fate. The more I achieved, the more I needed to achieve just to feel secure. For the first time in years, perhaps decades, I saw my daughter clearly, not as the cold, ambitious woman who had dismissed my need for help, but as a frightened girl who had witnessed vulnerability and vowed never to experience it herself. "What happens now?" I asked quietly. Vanessa reached into her purse and pulled out a thick envelope. "I've been doing a lot of thinking about Dad, about you, about the kind of example I've been setting for Emma." She handed me the envelope. "This is my response to the trust conditions." Inside was a formal letter, printed on her law firm's stationery. "To the trustees of the Sullivan Family Trust. After careful consideration, I, Vanessa Sullivan Harrington, hereby accept all conditions set forth regarding my potential inheritance." The letter continued, outlining her commitment to fulfilling each requirement: volunteer work with a legal aid clinic serving low-income seniors, financial education courses, establishment of a structured education trust for Emma. Beneath this formal document was something more personal, a handwritten note on plain stationery. "Mom, I've spent my entire adult life believing wealth was the ultimate safety net. I now realize true security comes from something deeper, the values and relationships that money can't buy. I failed your test, and I'm sorry. Not because it might cost me an inheritance, but because I failed to be the daughter you deserved when you needed me most. I don't expect immediate forgiveness, but I hope you'll give me the chance to show you that I can be different, that I want to be different, for Emma's sake, for yours, and for my own. With love and regret, Vanessa." I read the note twice, then carefully folded it and returned it to the envelope. When I looked up, Vanessa was watching me with an expression I hadn't seen since she was a child, uncertain, vulnerable, hopeful. I told Harrison, my attorney, that I wouldn't be pursuing any challenges to the trust, she said quietly. "He thinks I'm insane to leave that much money on the table," as he put it. "And what do you think?" I asked. She took a deep breath. "I think I need to relearn some things that I used to know about what really matters." She hesitated, then added, "Emma helped me see that. She asked me last week why having money made people mean. Despite everything, I smiled. Out of the mouths of babes. She's smarter than I was at her age. Kinder, too." Vanessa's voice softened. "I don't want her to grow up thinking her value comes from her bank account. I don't want her to treat people the way I treated you." The admission hung between us, honest and raw. I reached across the space separating us and took my daughter's hand. "It's not too late to change course, Vanessa. It never is." Her fingers tightened around mine. "I've already started. I stepped down from the partnership track at the firm. I'm transitioning to their pro bono division, focusing on elder law and financial abuse cases." I couldn't hide my surprise. "That's a significant change. A necessary one." She managed a small smile. "Don't worry. I'll still be able to pay Emma's tuition. Just maybe not the Audi payments, too." "The horror," I said dryly. And to my delight, Vanessa actually laughed. A genuine sound I hadn't heard from her in too long. "I'm not saying I've had some magical transformation," she cautioned. "I still catch myself thinking in the old patterns, but I'm trying. And I want—" She hesitated. "I want to help with your recovery. The right way this time. Not because of what I might get out of it, but because you're my mother and I love you." The words I had waited so long to hear. Not perfect, not a complete resolution, but a beginning. "I'd like that," I said simply. As the afternoon sun slanted across the porch, casting long shadows across the floorboards worn smooth by decades of family footsteps, I felt Robert's presence as strongly as if he were sitting beside us. He would have been pleased, I thought. Not triumphant, not vindicated, but quietly satisfied that our daughter was finding her way back to the values we had tried to instill. The test had worked after all, though not in the way we had originally imagined. Sometimes the longest journeys Begin with a painful first step. Summer bloomed across Mapleton Heights, bringing with it a particular kind of golden light that always reminded me of Robert. He'd loved this time of year. The lengthening days, the birdsong that started before dawn, the lazy evenings on the porch with fireflies punctuating the darkness like earthbound stars. 2 months had passed since Vanessa's unexpected apology. True to her word, she had begun the process of honoring the trust conditions, though not without struggle. Old habits, as they say, die hard. "Mother, this is ridiculous," Vanessa declared one sweltering July afternoon as she drove me home from my cardiology appointment. "Dr. Mehta said your recovery is exceptional. You don't need to keep living in that old house with those steep stairs. Let me at least help you find a nice single-level place." I gazed out the window at the familiar streets of our town. "I'm managing just fine, thank you. Joanna comes 3 times a week, and I've moved my bedroom to the first-floor study." "But, Vanessa," I interrupted gently, "one of the most important lessons your father and I learned over the years is the difference between wants and needs. I don't need a new house. What I need is to be surrounded by memories and familiar routines while I recover." She fell silent, her hands tight on the steering wheel. I noticed she'd traded in her sleek Audi for a more practical Volvo. Still luxury, but less ostentatious. A small step, perhaps, but a notable one. "Fine," she conceded finally. "But will you at least let me hire someone to update that ancient bathroom? Walk-in showers exist for a reason, and they're much safer for someone in your condition." I smiled faintly. "My condition? I'm recovering from a heart attack, not turning into glass." "Mother, a bathroom update would be acceptable," I allowed, recognizing the genuine concern beneath her brusque manner. Vanessa nodded, satisfied with this small victory. As we pulled into my driveway, she hesitated before turning off the engine. "There's something else we need to discuss." The seriousness in her tone caught my attention. "Oh?" "It's about the Westlake manufacturing shares." She turned to face me. "I've been working with the legal aid clinic, helping seniors who've been victims of financial exploitation. Last week, a client came in, a former employee of Westlake from Dad's era." My pulse quickened slightly. "Who?" "Henry Drummond. He worked in the engineering department for almost 30 years. The name was vaguely familiar. I think I remember him from company picnics. Tall man, always wore bow ties." "That's him." Vanessa nodded. "He's 83 now, living on Social Security and a pension that's barely keeping up with inflation. He came to us because his grandson convinced him to take out a reverse mortgage that turned out to be predatory." "That's terrible," I said. Sincerely. "But what does this have to do with Westlake shares?" Vanessa hesitated, choosing her words carefully. "While reviewing his employment history, I discovered something troubling. In the late 80s, when Dad was acquiring his stake in the company, there was an employee stock option program that wasn't properly administered. Many workers, including Henry, never received shares they were entitled to." I stared at her, processing this information. "Are you saying your father's investments were somehow improper?" "No," she said quickly. "I don't think Dad knew about the administrative error. But the fact remains that dozens of longtime employees were shortchanged, while the executives and outside investors like Dad benefited. The implication hung heavily between us. Had Robert's success, part of the foundation of our fortune, been built partly on the backs of people like Henry Drummond? "What do you propose?" I asked quietly. Vanessa took a deep breath. "I've been reviewing the trust documents. There's a provision that allows for remediation of past business inequities using trust assets. I think we should establish a fund for the affected employees or their heirs. It would be substantial, potentially several $1,000,000, but it's the right thing to do." I studied my daughter's face, searching for any hint of the calculating woman who had dismissed my medical needs just months ago. Instead, I saw only earnest determination, and something else that looked remarkably like her father's sense of justice. "Have you discussed this with Martin?" I asked. "Not yet. I wanted to speak with you first." I nodded slowly. "Let's invite him for lunch tomorrow. I'd like to hear more about your proposal." As we entered the house, I couldn't help but reflect on the irony. The test I had set for Vanessa, meant to reveal her character, was now prompting her to test mine. Was I truly committed to the principles of integrity and fairness that Robert and I had claimed were more important than wealth? Or would I balk when those principles threatened to reduce the fortune we had accumulated? The next morning, I woke early and made my way to the kitchen, intending to prepare breakfast before Martin and Vanessa arrived. To my surprise, Emma was already there, measuring flour into a mixing bowl. "Emma, what are you doing here so early?" She looked up with a grin. "Mom dropped me off on her way to meet with Mr. Drummond. I told her I wanted to make you breakfast. Real food, not that cardboard toast Joanna makes you eat." I laughed, watching as she cracked eggs with surprising skill. "And what constitutes real food in your expert opinion?" "Blueberry pancakes, obviously." "With real maple syrup, not that fake corn syrup stuff." She wrinkled her nose in disgust. "Mom says your cholesterol is too high for bacon, but I brought turkey sausage instead." Very considerate. I moved to help, but Emma shooed me toward a chair. "Sit. Doctor's orders. Mom says you're supposed to rest." "Your mother seems to have a lot of opinions about my recovery," I observed mildly. Emma rolled her eyes. "She's just worried about you. She has your hospital photo as her phone wallpaper now, you know." This genuinely surprised me. "Does she?" "Mm-hmm. And she's been reading all these books about heart health and longevity. There are, like, sticky notes everywhere." Emma poured batter onto the hot griddle with careful concentration. "She's different since your heart attack. Less, I don't know, stressed? Angry? Something." I watched my granddaughter move around the kitchen with confidence, noting how much she had grown just in the past few months. "Different how?" Emma considered this as she flipped a perfectly golden pancake. "She listens more. Like, actually listens instead of just waiting for her turn to talk. And she started this thing where we have dinner together every night with no phones allowed." She transferred the pancake to a plate and poured another circle of batter. "Last week she even canceled a client meeting because it was my debate championship." "Did you win?" Emma beamed. "First place. Mom cheered so loud it was kind of embarrassing." "I'm sorry I missed it," I said sincerely. "Next time I'll make sure you're there." She set a plate of pancakes in front of me, then took the seat opposite. "Grandma, can I ask you something?" "Of course." "Are you really rich? Like super rich?" I nearly choked on my first bite. "What makes you ask that?" "Mom and I had a big talk last weekend. She said that you and Grandpa built something important. But that money isn't what makes people important." Emma cut her pancakes into precise triangles. "She said she used to think it was, but she was wrong. Then she made me promise not to tell anyone at school about the family situation, whatever that means." I considered how to respond to this remarkably direct question. Emma deserved honesty, but she was still a child. "Your grandfather and I were fortunate in our investments," I said carefully. "We did well financially, yes, but we always believed that character matters more than bank accounts." Emma nodded thoughtfully. "Mom said something like that too. She said Grandpa was the smartest, kindest man she ever knew, and that she forgot a lot of what he taught her, but she's trying to remember now." My heart swelled at the thought of Vanessa speaking of her father this way to Emma. Perhaps Robert's legacy would live on in ways we hadn't anticipated. The doorbell rang, interrupting our conversation. Martin had arrived, and Vanessa wasn't far behind him. Soon, my small dining room was filled with voices as we discussed the Westlake situation over coffee. "The documentation is compelling," Martin acknowledged, reviewing the files Vanessa had brought. "The administrative error affected approximately 70 employees, most of whom are now elderly or deceased. If we establish a remediation fund, Vanessa explained, we can locate these individuals or their heirs and provide them with the value of the shares they should have received, plus reasonable interest. The total amount would be close to $4 million, Martin noted, glancing at me. It would require liquidating some of the trust's holdings. $4 million, I repeated softly. Not an insignificant sum, even for our substantial trust. Vanessa leaned forward. Mother, we don't have to do this. Legally, there's no obligation. The statute of limitations has long expired. But ethically? I asked. Ethically? She hesitated. I believe Dad would want to make this right. I closed my eyes briefly, imagining what Robert would say if he were here. The answer came easily. Then we'll make it right. The relief on Vanessa's face was palpable. Thank you. Don't thank me, I said. This was your initiative. Your father would be proud of you for bringing it to light. For a moment, Vanessa looked like she might cry, a rare display of emotion from my usually composed daughter. She quickly regained control, turning to Martin to discuss implementation details. I excused myself from the table, needing a moment alone. In the quiet of the kitchen, I found Emma loading the dishwasher. You don't have to do that, I told her. She shrugged. I don't mind. Mom says we should always clean up our own messes. Your mother is becoming quite wise in her old age, I said with a small smile. Emma closed the dishwasher and turned to face me. Mom told me about the Westlake thing, about how you're giving away money to make something right that happened a long time ago. She did she? She said it's what integrity looks like. Emma's clear eyes met mine. I think it's pretty cool. From the mouth of a 12-year-old, this constituted high praise indeed. Thank you, Emma. She hesitated, then asked, Is it hard, giving away that much money? I considered the question carefully. Money itself isn't hard to give away. What's difficult is acknowledging that something you benefited from might have caused harm to others, even unintentionally. Emma nodded solemnly. Like when I got the lead in the school play last year, but then found out Lily Chen should have gotten it because the drama teacher didn't see her audition video. Exactly like that, I said, impressed by her perception. Did you do the right thing then? I told the truth and they gave us both parts, Emma said. We had to share, but it felt better than knowing I got something I didn't deserve. Out of the mouths of babes, indeed. Later that afternoon, after Martin had departed with the necessary paperwork to establish the remediation fund, Vanessa lingered on the porch. Emma had gone inside to call a friend, leaving us alone in the golden, late daylight. Thank you, Vanessa said quietly, for supporting the Westlake initiative. It was the right decision. Still. She gazed out at the neighborhood, the modest homes with their well-tended gardens. It would have been easier to ignore it, to rationalize that it happened decades ago, that legal responsibility had expired. Easier, yes, I agreed, but not better. Vanessa turned to me, her expression serious. All those years I spent chasing wealth and status. I think I was trying to fill something empty inside me. Some need to prove myself. She shook her head, ruefully. And all along, you and Dad had more than I could imagine, but you chose a different path. We weren't perfect, Vanessa, I said gently. Our methods were unconventional, to say the least. Testing you the way we did was exactly what I needed, she finished. I was becoming someone I don't think I would have liked very much. A comfortable silence fell between us, the first in longer than I could remember. Mom, Vanessa said finally, using the more informal address she'd avoided for years. I've been thinking about the beach house in Sanibel. What about it? You've never even seen it, have you? This property you've owned for decades? I shook my head. It was an investment, not a vacation home. Well, Dr. Mehta says your recovery is going well. Emma has 3 weeks before school starts again. She glanced at me, almost shyly. What would you think about actually using one of those properties you own? The 3 of us. A family vacation. The invitation caught me by surprise. You want to take a vacation? With me? Is that so hard to believe? Frankly, yes, I admitted. The Vanessa I knew 3 months ago wouldn't have suggested it. The Vanessa from 3 months ago was an idiot, she said bluntly. I'm trying to be different, better. She hesitated. Emma needs to know her grandmother. I need to know my mother. Really know you, not just the version I constructed in my head. I felt something shift between us, a door long closed beginning to open. Sanibel in August is dreadfully hot, I said mildly, so we'll crank up the air conditioning, or try the place in Colorado instead. The point is, she broke off clearly, frustrated with herself. The point is, I want us to be a family, a real one, not just people connected by DNA and financial trusts. I looked at my daughter, really looked at her, and saw beyond the polished exterior to the woman struggling to redefine herself, to grow beyond the limitations she had unknowingly accepted. Sanibel sounds lovely, I said softly. I've always wanted to collect seashells. Vanessa's smile, genuine, unguarded, was like witnessing a flower unfurl after a long winter. Then Sanibel it is. As Emma bounded back onto the porch, chattering excitedly about the upcoming trip, I felt Robert's presence more strongly than ever. Not everything had unfolded as we had planned, but perhaps the outcome was better than we could have imagined. Our fortune had finally accomplished what we had always intended. Not just financial security, but the true wealth of family connection, integrity, and purpose that transcended any bank balance. 1 year later, the ceremony was small but meaningful, held in the community room of the Mapleton Heights Public Library. Just 40 people gathered to witness the official launch of the Sullivan Foundation, though the impact of what we were beginning would eventually reach thousands. I sat in the front row beside Emma, now 13 and growing more poised by the day. She wore a simple blue dress and her grandmother's pearls, a gift I had presented to her that morning, telling her that true heirlooms carried stories, not just monetary value. At the podium, Vanessa stood tall and confident, but with a softness that had been absent during her corporate law days. Her hair was shorter now, her clothes less severe, though still elegant in their simplicity. Thank you all for coming today, she began, her voice steady as she addressed the room. The Sullivan Foundation represents more than just a charitable organization. It embodies values my parents instilled in me, values I lost sight of for a time, but have been fortunate enough to rediscover. My eyes swept across the gathered attendees, Martin and Clara Edwards, Henry Drummond and several other former Westlake employees, representatives from the local hospital and educational institutions, a small cohort from the legal aid clinic where Vanessa now worked full-time. When my father, Robert Sullivan, passed away 5 years ago, Vanessa continued, he left behind more than just material assets. He left a legacy of quiet integrity, of believing that wealth is a responsibility, not a privilege. Today we honor that legacy by dedicating the majority of the Sullivan family resources to addressing 3 core areas: elder care and protection, educational opportunity, and community revitalization right here in our hometown. I felt a deep sense of satisfaction as I watched my daughter speak so eloquently about principles that had once seemed foreign to her. The past year had brought changes none of us could have predicted. The Westlake Remediation Fund had been just the beginning. After establishing it, Vanessa had discovered a genuine passion for restorative justice in business contexts. She'd left corporate law entirely, focusing instead on helping older Americans navigate financial challenges and advocating for reforms to protect vulnerable seniors. More surprising still was her decision, after months of careful consideration, to simplify her own life dramatically. She'd sold her luxury condo and purchased a modest craftsman bungalow just 4 blocks from my house. Emma had switched from her exclusive private academy to the public magnet school for gifted students, where she was thriving not just academically, but socially as well. The Foundation's first initiative, Vanessa explained to the audience, is the Sullivan Medical Advocacy Program, which will provide navigators to help seniors understand and manage healthcare costs, insurance claims, and financial assistance options. My heart swelled with pride. This program had been Vanessa's idea, born directly from her shameful memory of walking away from my hospital room. What had begun as her greatest moral failure had transformed into a mission to ensure no elderly person would face medical financial crises alone. None of this would be possible, Vanessa concluded, her voice softening as she met my gaze, without the wisdom and patience of my mother, Evelyn Sullivan. Mom, would you please join me? I rose slowly. My heart was stronger now, but I still moved with the deliberate care of a woman in her 8th decade, and made my way to the podium. As Vanessa embraced me, the audience applauded warmly. The Sullivan Foundation is pleased to announce its founding endowment of $50 million, I stated clearly into the microphone, to be deployed over the next decade in service to our community. Afterward, as guests mingled over refreshments, Henry Drummond approached me, leaning slightly on his cane. Mrs. Sullivan, he said, extending his hand. I worked with Robert for nearly 30 years, though I doubt he would have remembered me. On the contrary, Mr. Drummond, I replied, shaking his hand warmly. Robert spoke highly of your engineering innovations. The moisture-resistant sealing method you developed saved the company millions. Surprise flickered across his weathered face. He knew about that? Robert made it his business to know who was truly responsible for Westlake's successes, even when others took the credit. I smiled gently. It troubled him greatly when executive management began sidelining the contributions of career employees like yourself. Henry's eyes grew distant. Those were different times. We just did our jobs, didn't make waves, which is precisely why the remediation fund was so important, I noted. Excellence and contribution should be recognized, even belatedly. He studied me thoughtfully. You know, when your daughter first contacted me about the fund, I was skeptical. Thought it might be some kind of scam or publicity stunt. He gestured toward where Vanessa was deep in conversation with a community college president. But she's the real deal, isn't she? Just like her father. She found her way back to what matters, I agreed. Sometimes the longest journeys lead us home. As the event wound down, Emma appeared at my side, slipping her hand into mine. Grandma, can we still have our Thursday dinner tonight? Mom said we should ask if you're too tired after all this. Our Thursday dinners had become a cherished tradition. Sometimes at my house, sometimes at Vanessa's, occasionally at the modest local restaurants that had once been beneath my daughter's notice, but now formed the backdrop of our reconnected family life. I wouldn't miss it for the world, I assured her. Though perhaps we should order in rather than cook. Already taken care of, Vanessa said, joining us. Mr. Chen is preparing our usual order as we speak. She glanced at her watch. We should be able to pick it up on our way home. Home. Such a simple word, yet so profound in its implications. Not just a place, but a feeling, a belonging. Later that evening, seated around my dining room table with containers of excellent Chinese food spread before us, I watched Vanessa and Emma laughing together over some school anecdote. The easy affection between them, the lack of tension that had once characterized their relationship felt like a small miracle. I have something to show you both, I said when there was a natural lull in the conversation. I retrieved a carved wooden box from the sideboard, Robert's handiwork, one of his many quiet talents. I found this while going through some old papers last week. Inside was a letter, the paper yellowed with age, the ink slightly faded. Robert wrote this the year we were married, when we were just starting out. I thought you might like to hear his words. I unfolded the letter carefully and began to read. My dearest Evelyn, as we begin our life together, I want to set down some thoughts about the future we might build. Today, we have little in the way of material wealth. Our apartment is small, our furniture second-hand, our savings modest. But I believe true prosperity isn't measured in dollars and cents. If we are fortunate in our endeavors, we may someday acquire significant financial resources. Should that come to pass, I hope we will remember these early days of simple happiness. I hope we will use whatever wealth we accumulate to create security without ostentation, opportunity without entitlement, legacy without burden. Most of all, I hope we will teach our children that character is the only true currency that matters, that integrity, compassion, and purpose will sustain them long after material possessions have lost their luster. Whatever the future holds, my love, let us measure our success not by what we possess, but by what we give back to the world that has blessed us so abundantly. All my love. Robert. I folded the letter and looked up to find Vanessa wiping tears from her eyes. He wrote that. When you were young? She asked softly. Before everything? I nodded. Your father knew who he was from the very beginning. It took me longer to understand his vision, but eventually I embraced it completely. And I nearly destroyed it, Vanessa said quietly. No, I corrected her firmly. You lost your way for a time, but you found it again. That's not destruction, that's growth. Emma, who had been uncharacteristically quiet, finally spoke. So Grandpa knew all along that you guys would be rich someday? Not knew, I explained, hoped, and prepared for the possibility. But more importantly, he wanted to ensure that wealth would serve our values, not define them. Is that why you guys lived in a regular house and drove old cars even though you could afford mansions and Ferraris? Emma asked. I smiled at her direct phrasing. Precisely. We found that beyond a certain point of comfort and security, additional luxury didn't bring additional happiness. So we chose to live simply and direct our resources toward more meaningful purposes. Like the foundation, Vanessa added, and like ensuring that when our time comes to leave this world, we'll be remembered not for what we owned, but for what we stood for. I reached out, taking both their hands in mine. That's the true inheritance your grandfather wanted to leave, not just to you, but to everyone whose lives we touch. As dusk settled outside the windows of the home where so much of our family story had unfolded, I felt a profound sense of completion. The test I had set for Vanessa had yielded results far beyond what Robert and I had ever imagined. Not just a daughter who had rediscovered her moral compass, but a granddaughter who would carry forward our deepest values and a foundation that would extend our family's purpose long after we were gone. The silent empire we had built wasn't measured in millions after all, but in moments like these, in connections restored, lessons learned, and love that had weathered even the harshest of tests. Some fortunes can't be calculated on any balance sheet. They can only be felt in a heart that recognizes what truly matters. Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hits the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out. And don't forget to subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you don't miss any upload from us.